Thirsty for action? Let's crack open the Sunday Six-Pack.
All right, for my first pick of the Super Bowl 58 Sunday Six-Pack, I'm rolling with the Kansas City Chiefs +2 against the Niners. And there are a bunch of different factors why I like the Chiefs in this game, despite them being a dog. And there's also, I think, a lot of misinformation, or a lot of people kind of, because the public is on the Chiefs for the most part that I've seen, but I don't see a lot of people kind of breaking down why beyond, oh, well, Mahomes did enough in the first half last week. So I saw all I need to see. I don't want to bet against Mahomes as a dog, yada, yada. But I do think that this Kansas City offense enters this matchup a little bit underrated, and that sounds crazy to say with probably the second greatest quarterback, maybe the greatest when it's all said and done ever. But here's why I think that this Chief offense is overrated, and why I think it can have success against the Niners defense. So I think the big thing here, first of all, for me, that actually made a dent in or changed the, how I rate the Chiefs and their offense, is something we saw last week that we really haven't seen all year. And it didn't really go to notice because the Chiefs only put up 17 points, didn't do anything in the second half. But Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, Justin Ross played a combined one snap, excluding kneel downs. Obviously, Toney was a scratch again. Hardman went from being in on 40 to 45% of the pass plays the first two postseason games to one snap. Sky Moore wasn't activated off IR, and Justin Ross was active but only played on the kneel down. So why is that such a big factor? These guys are like ancillary receivers. Well, when you're handicapping this game, the common thing is you're going to kind of say, well, this has been a down year for the Chiefs offense. They're just not as good. Maybe Tyreek is finally starting to catch up to them. Mahomes hasn't been as good, all that stuff. Well, those four guys, Toney, Hardman, Sky Moore, Justin Ross, have been incredibly awful this year, to the point where the Chiefs' EPA offensive changes completely when you kind of remove these guys from the equation, which
drops.
Drops. Oh my God. Yeah. It's more than drops. I'm going to run through it. I think I'm going to write a whole piece on it because I do think it's important. And it's just fascinating to me. Just how bad this, what is that? Quartet? That's 4, right? Or is that 5? Yeah. I think 4 is
a quartet.
Yeah. 4. Yeah. Quartet, yeah. This quartet has been terrible. Now, I won't go through every single number, but here are some of the highlights. Kadarius Toney, 50 plays for him drawn up between targets and rushing attempts. 200 yards from those plays, 4 yards a play. That's awful. Mecole Hardman, excluding week 18 when everyone rested and he played every snap and Mahomes didn't start. Mecole Hardman, 19 plays have been drawn up for him. 44 yards, 2.3 yards a play. Passer ratings. Let's talk passer ratings. We know Mahomes, usually well over 100. Kadarius Toney, 68. What's even crazier, 68 passer rating on an average depth of target under 3. If you have an average depth of target under 3, you're supposed to be super efficient. There's supposed to be no turnovers, nothing like that. But Kadarius Toney, 68. That's the best. Ross, 67.6. Sky Moore, 53.5. Mecole Hardman, 44.3. And all these guys are relatively low ADOT guys. Now, if you total all of the mistakes up, 11 drops charted at PFF. I'm sure different charting sites have different numbers, but 11 drops, 7 interceptions. Remember, Mahomes only threw 14 picks this year. That was a lot for him. But 7 interceptions between these 4 guys on just 112 targets. So just 1/6 of essentially Kansas City's passing attempts, half of the interceptions. 4 fumbles, a couple penalties, a muff punt, 2 absolutely essentially game-losing plays when you talk about Toney's picked tip on the Lions game, 21-20, the Chiefs lost. And then the jump off sides on the Buffalo game cost them that game. Also, 2 of 16 in terms of converting red zone targets into touchdowns, less than half of the rate for every other Kansas City pass catcher. And now if you look at Mahomes' numbers, which this is where it really opened my eyes, because remember, Mahomes only has 95 targets, these guys. Overall, they have 112. A couple of those came with the backup, but Mahomes has 95 targets to those 4 guys combined. If you remove them, which without even replacing, because usually if you remove, wide receiver numbers from a quarterback, his numbers are going to get worse because wide receivers are getting the most yardage and whatnot. But you remove those 4 guys, Mahomes' yards per attempt goes from 7.0 to 7.5, which is a massive jump. And remember, yardage per attempt efficiency in the pass game is directly correlated to point differential. So 7 to 7.5. And then we know turnovers, you win the turnover battle, you win about 75, 80% of the time. Mahomes' interception rate goes from 2% even to 1.16%. It nearly cuts in half, despite removing less than 100 attempts.
And I don't think he has a turnover-worthy throw.
I'll get to that. Because that's, Mahomes has gone, I'll put it this way. Mahomes has gone the longest stretch of his career without a turnover-worthy play, according to PFF's charting. Right now, he's still in the midst of that. His touchdown percentage also goes up. So literally, essentially the 2 most important components to winning football games, pass game efficiency and turnovers, have a direct correlation to these 4 terrible receivers that saw 1 combined snap last week in the most important game of the year. So that's the first thing. Now, you also, when you're looking at the Chiefs and saying, okay, their offense kind of mid this year. Well, I don't believe in just, looking at like, oh, well, they did good in the first half last week. That's just one. It's like, that's recency bias, right? And you're just discounting half the game for no reason because they didn't do anything in the second half. But I am a proponent of, you have to find the relevant sample, and you're not always going to find the relevant sample as is. Sometimes you have to dig deeper and kind of put things together, like I'm kind of doing, okay, what happens if we remove these receivers who aren't going to play? So Travis Kelce, remember, he missed week 1. He's on the field for, usually over 90% of the pass plays, averaged just a 76% route participation rate through the bye, didn't even hit 90% in a game until week 11. But we know what he can do in the postseason. He's scored 18 touchdowns in 17 games with Mahomes. Rashee Rice, the rookie.
By the way, I think Kelce has benefited from some of the rest. Like he rested week 18. Right. And he's obviously getting up there. And then he'll obviously benefit from 2 weeks before the Super Bowl as well.
Yeah, he just looks, you could just tell just by watching him. He just looks, he's ready to go. So, the talk of his demise was premature. But Rashee Rice, another key component to this offense, and really the reason that none of these other guys that I mentioned have to play anymore. Remember, rookie who came into week 1 and, Reed generally, not going to, and Mahomes even, they're going to kind of, not always going to trust rookies right off the bat. So Rashee Rice, who's a 90% guy now, averaged just a 35% route participation rate through the first 6 weeks, 60% up until week 13. So even once he started playing more, he was still, kind of getting snaps akin to a third receiver. But this guy is top 5 in yards per route against zone coverage on the year. And remember, San Francisco heavy zone team. Like Travis Kelce, catches over 80% of his targets. And you're talking about one of the most, if not the most accurate passer in the game. So you've replaced those crappy receivers who are just losing games for you with a guy like Rice, who hasn't been a real downfield threat. His average at the target is around 5. But what that does is, combined with Kelce, you now have 2 just elite, hyper efficient, underneath to intermediate options for Mahomes to replace all these gadget guys that it just wasn't working out for. And then on top of that, Isaiah Pacheco even missed a few games this season. And if you look at Pacheco's numbers versus the rest of Kansas City running backs that carried the football, there's also, you probably have to bump up Kansas City's offense, because when you look at Pacheco, he's averaging, 4.5 yards a carry. He's getting a run of 15 or more about 5% of the time. Other Kansas City running backs carried the ball 123 times this year for just 3.4 yards per carry, and just 3 runs of 15 or more. So no explosiveness, no efficiency. So you got to bump Kansas City up for that too. So you put all those things together, and this Kansas City offense, I think, is underrated in the market. It's a tough, there's a lot of different moving parts that you kind of have to put together to really get an accurate handicap of this offense. But then you start looking at the matchup. Okay, San Francisco's defense generally has been good this year, but we know a couple of things about them. Number one, their run defense. Everyone's talking about the Chiefs. If you remove, garbage time, which you shouldn't really be looking at running back rushing stats in garbage time, because you're either expecting the run or teams are just going to let you run. You remove garbage time. San Francisco is actually worse in a lot of run defense metrics than the Kansas City Chiefs, and especially in these playoffs. But also, they struggle with mobile quarterbacks, because their main advantage on defense and it has been like this for years now, is they can rush 4 and drop 7 in a coverage. Well, when you have a quarterback that can move around, that throws off the math a little bit, because now you have this extra offensive player to account for. And we know Mahomes in the playoffs, his scramble rate goes up. He's averaging about 7 yards per game more career postseason than regular season. His yards per carry goes up. And that's even with some very long kneel downs. And his touchdowns rate more than doubles. So Mahomes, he's going to move around. And you mentioned it. He's playing some of the best ball of his life. He's learned to be more patient in the pocket, but he also knows exactly when to take off. He's not forcing any throws, but he's looking for, his high percentage guys, which he has 2 of now underneath, because Rashee Rice averaging just under 6 catches a game, 70 yards a game since week 6. And that the other effect of that is, because you have Rice playing every snap, because you have Kelce as another elite underneath guy, and of course, Pacheco would be the other underneath guy. But what that's done is, when you stop playing Hardman, you stop playing Tony, all these other guys, you have Watson and you have Valdez-Scantling on the outside. So if teams sell out and you want to double Kelce and you want to double Rice or something like to that extent, well, now he has 2 field stretchers, 1 on each side. And we know Mahomes is one of the best deep ball throwers, one of the most accurate deep ball throwers. And Watson and MVS both can beat man coverage. That's kind of their specialty, as you would expect from field stretches. Watson just 0.7 yards per route against zone, but 2.3 against man. That's very good. And MVS 0.65 yards per route against zone, 1.6 against man. So he more than doubles. And so that's kind of when and Mahomes is trusting him more. So if you get San Francisco out of its zone, because, Mahomes can just dice that up, you have a top 5 guy in Rice against zone. Well, if you get San Francisco out of that, now Mahomes has, 2 guys on the outside that can beat man coverage. And also now you're making San Francisco's defense play a little bit left-handed, because if you look at their numbers, when they are playing man coverage on the season, their adjusted net yards in attempt increases a whole half a yard, which again, is pretty massive, especially when you're talking about point differential. Their touchdown rate it quadruples, goes from 1.5% to 6.7% allowed when they go from zone to man. And in the postseason, it's been even more pronounced. They are giving up about 5.3 adjusted net yards per attempt when they're in zone coverage. When they're in man, that goes to 7.9. So this Kansas City offense, I think, can put some pressure on this Niner defense. Mahomes has been a lot better at checking into runs, and I do think they're vulnerable on the ground. But let's flip it around. Let's look at the Niners offense now, because we know this Kansas City defense has been elite. But when you look at San Francisco's offense, they've been excellent too, especially when everyone's healthy. But the one thing about kind of breaking out San Francisco and saying, well, okay, as long as Trent and Debo are healthy, this team has been unstoppable. There's no way to stop them. Well, yes, it just so happened that they got injured all at the same time and in some tough matchups. But I also think there's something that the Chiefs can kind of replicate that is going to give Purdy trouble. And obviously, this is Mahomes, fourth Super Bowl. This is Purdy's first, but beyond that, it wasn't just that in the 4 losses, which were Cleveland, Minnesota, Cincinnati, Baltimore. It wasn't just that, okay, Debo and Trent were out, so, the offense was less efficient, which you would expect and would be understandable, but Brock Purdy also made a lot more just flat out mistakes in those games. 9 of his 12 picks came in those 4 losses. 11 of his 21, so more than half of his turnover-worthy plays came in those 4 matchups. And, besides the injuries, what else do these 4 matchups have in common and also have in common with the Chiefs in this matchup? Elite defensive minds at coordinator. Cleveland has Jim Schwartz. Minnesota has Brian Flores, and we've talked ad nauseum about the impact he's had. Cincinnati, Lou Anarumo famously had the game plan of his life to stop Mahomes from going to another Super Bowl a couple years ago. And Baltimore, Mike McDonald, one of the hottest coaching hires on the market, and a team that actually did shut out Mahomes and the Chiefs for the entire second half, which still relatively impressive. Well, Steve Spagnuolo, just as good as all these guys. And when you look at playoff Spagnuolo, I mean, it might even be better. Remember, this is the guy that came up with the game plan that shut down Tom Brady when they were undefeated in 2007. And now he finally has defensive talent to work with. So that brings me to what I think is going to give people the most pause about picking the Chiefs, if people do have pause, and that's the matchup in the run game. San Francisco with McCaffrey going up against the Chiefs. Well, we know run is less important in the past. Like, that's just the analytically, that's what the analytics said. We know that, right? So Spagnuolo knows this too. The coordinators know this too. So when you look at run defense stats, a lot of times it's, especially with these good teams, there is a lot of noise. There is some, okay, we're going to let these, teams run on us because we have Patrick Mahomes, or we have, a Purdy and McCaffrey and Debo, and we can score 30 in every game. So that's some of it. But let's break down Kansas City 4 worst rushing games this year. 182 given up rushing yardage wise to Buffalo in the divisional round. Now, again, everything is kind of a give and take when it comes to run defense. You can sell out to stop the run, but you're going to load the box. You're going to take resources away from the pass and whatnot. So 182 to Buffalo, but they hold Buffalo to just 186 passing yards. 157 to Vegas in week 16, also recent, but they held Vegas to 48 passing yards. 153 to Denver in week 8, but they held Denver to 87 passing yards. So you sense a trend here. They're giving up about 100 passing yards a game in these games where they're, playing the worst run defense. Then the 4th one was the Chargers game in week 18, which, for obvious reasons I'm not even going to get into. The other 16 games for the Chiefs, allowing 102 rushing yards a game, right around league average in yards per carry. And if you remove garbage time, which I defined as, anytime there's, 10% win probability or less. So, 10 to 90, essentially, when you count both teams, and you remove week 18. So just looking at early downs, let's look at early downs, because that's obviously when San Francisco's want to run the ball. Look at early downs, remove week 18, and remove garbage time. Kansas City, 16th in run defense success rate on early downs at 37%. So right around league average. And for comparison, San Francisco, 39.8, they're 22nd. So like I said, some of the run defensive metrics actually, San Francisco is just as worrisome in the playoffs. San Francisco's been 5% worse. So, Kansas City, yeah, will they get run on? Absolutely. But is it something that is necessarily going to lose them the game? I don't think so. And then, to close it out, look at some trends. Patrick Mahomes in the postseason, 12-5 against the spread, 71% covering by a field goal per game. Straight up, 82% at 14-3. And when you look at Mahomes' 3 postseason losses, twice to Tom Brady, once with Bill Belichick, which also, goes back, like when you have those elite defensive mind, that always helps. So twice to Tom Brady and once to Joe Burrow, who also had Anarumo as the defensive coordinator. So Tom Brady twice and Joe Burrow, that's it. That's only times Patrick Mahomes has ever lost as an underdog, 10-1-1 against the spread career, covering by 7.5 points per game. So should be a good matchup. I think a pretty evenly matched game overall, but I do think the market is a little bit low on the Chiefs. So love taking the points here. Give me KC +2.
Solo pod for the Super Bowl.
I had to go in. I had to get it all out.
Like 40-minute first pick of the 6-pack. It's 4. Luckily, I don't sleep. It's 4 a.m. Some people might have fallen asleep if they were at 8 hours. But that was amazing stuff as always. I'll go into my second pick and the second overall of the Super Bowl Sunday 6-pack. I'm going with the 49ers money line in the first half. So what a transition. You went on this long winding road on both sides of the ball, breaking down, which is what we want to do for this game. And then I respond by saying, hey, we're going with the 49ers first half. So I agree with a lot of the things that you said, although the Chiefs' run defense is legitimately bad. And they also are and the 49ers are the best run offense in the NFL, and they have Kyle Shanahan with 2 weeks to prepare. And the Chiefs' defense is legitimately one of the worst in the NFL defending play action passing. So I think the 49ers are going to have a ton of success early on. And it's not just running the ball, which I think they'll have success doing, but I think they'll have a great script. I think they'll have some great play action passing. I think they'll have some trick plays with Debo. And I don't think that the stage is going to be too big for Purdy early on. So I think the 49ers offense will have success early. The Chiefs offense, I agree with you. They made some changes. They're giving more. Yeah, Mahomes is making more changes up at the line of scrimmage. They kind of cut off all the fat and just, anything that was holding them back. They're like, all right, let's just focus on, these 3 guys. And that's like who they're targeting. But the offense still has some issues. Like the tackles are still a liability. And Chase Young, by the way, looked horrendous in the NFC Championship game. We'll see if he shows up here. But so there's still some issues on. It's still not an electric passing attack. We'll talk about some of the MVP candidates. But the Chiefs offense will have some success. But here's where I agree with you. Because you have to keep in mind, they played the Dolphins they had no defensive linemen, no linebackers. They played the Bills, who were starting A.J. Klein. They ran out of linebackers. They were dealing with defensive back injuries. And then, the Ravens, they had those first 2 drives and then did nothing. So I agree. The offense is trending in the right direction, but there are still some issues under the hood. But how I see this game playing out is, so I make the line like 2-8, 2-9. I didn't adjust the Chiefs as much as I thought. Just the bizarre game plan from the Ravens. So, but where I think the Chiefs are like the most likely, how I see this game playing out is what I basically should go through. I agree. I think that what the 49ers do is they play a lot of quarters, cover 3. And obviously every defense plays every defense, but every type of coverage. But for the most part, that's what they'll play. You saw that, they're kind of similar to the Texans, D'Amico Ryans, Robert Saleh, and the Jets, similar coverage percentages. We saw what Mahomes did, for what it's worth, in 2022 against the D'Amico Ryans defense. I think he went to San Fran. They put up like 44.
Yeah, 44-20, I think it was.
Second half. So zoning Mahomes is not a great option, but I think that's when the 49ers defense is at its best. And you got to have Chase Young. Chase Young has to show up here. Or you put Armstead back at defensive end. You have to take advantage of these Chiefs tackles. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But the 49ers don't really make any other adjustments. People would talk about the adjustments that Steve Wilkes made in the NFC Championship game. The only thing he did is just play more man. And they were like, oh, it's brilliant. The Lions had so many opportunities to score. Open guys. Jameson Williams dropped that pass. So, that's their only adjustment. They're always going to have a 4-man front. their linebackers who are really good are always going to play a little back, which makes them a little bit more vulnerable to the run, but they can make some plays elsewhere. And then that's their only adjustment. So the 49ers at the half. So what can happen in the second half of this game? You have Spagnuolo, who can make significantly better adjustments schematically than Wilks, because I just don't. And one of the more interesting storylines is, will Spagnuolo blitz? I don't think he actually will as much as he's done before. Purdy's been great against the blitz, and we'll see if Spagnuolo, but he's still young. It's in the Super Bowl, so I'm really curious to see what the blitz rate is going to be here. Whatever happens, Spagnuolo's going to have time to adjust, right? So he's going to try some things out, and then in the second half, he can make his adjustments. And this is a Chiefs defense that has allowed fewer than 4 points over their last 8 games in the second half on average. I mean, that's incredible. So the defensive adjustments have been amazing. Also, special teams. You got a big kick at the end of this game. You're going to trust Butker over Moody every day of the week, twice on Sunday. And then you have Mahomes, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. If he has to come back, if he has the ball late, down, if he needs to have a late drive, flip that with Purdy. He's been great, but you would obviously trust Mahomes a lot more in the fourth quarter coming from behind than Purdy, who is still extremely inexperienced. So all three of those factors, special teams, defensive adjustments, Mahomes, fourth quarter, I think that's major advantage to the Chiefs. So I think that the 49ers, from just a numbers perspective, I show a little value. And I think that they don't have to worry about all those things in the first half. And I think that they're going to score early. They're going to have their script's going to be great. They've been one of the best first quarter offenses in the NFL all season. They're going to be able to run it. I think what the Ravens did kind of maybe works in their favor, right? Like the Niners are going to be like, all right, we saw what they did. I think it will probably make them throw a play action more early. But then the Chiefs are going to be able to adjust. The Chiefs are also going to be able to adjust on offense. And I think that's where their advantage comes in, is in the second half. So I think the Niners, and then look, if the Niners make that adjustment to get out of man, I don't think in this particular matchup, for all the reasons that you mentioned, will end up as a good thing. Even though Mahomes rips apart zones, I just don't trust this 49ers defense in man coverage, especially if Chase Young plays the way that he does it. And then that just opens up Mahomes running even more on like third and longs. And so from a numbers perspective, from what I think that this 49ers offense will do early, I like the Niners in the first half, but I don't hate your Chiefs bet at all. I don't think this line gets to 3. If it did, it would get, be really heavily juiced and get hit. But I don't hate your Chiefs bet, because you again, it's Mahomes as a dog, but we said it all the time. But it's the adjustments, the special teams, and the defensive schematic changes that Spagnuolo can make that Wilks just doesn't have that same bag. So I kind of making a case for the Chiefs a full game more than the Niners first half, but I do show value in the number. And I think that there is some recency bias in the Chiefs have had favorable matchups and teams just doing bizarre things and injuries, and the 49ers have escaped 2 games they probably should have lost. But this was a team that I power rated number 1 by a wide margin all season up until the Ravens' late surge, and significantly better than the Chiefs. If this game was a month and a half ago, the spread probably is 5.5.
Yeah.
6.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say maybe because the public just loves the Chiefs, it would still have been 3. But yeah, I mean, like from a power rating perspective,
but it would have been 5.5, 6.
Yeah, from a power rating perspective, absolutely.
Yeah. Super Bowl, whole different ball game. So, but I like the Niners first half money line, and I'll be looking for a chance to bet the Chiefs live if they go down. And I should mention, with some of the props, which we'll get into in the rest of the 6-pack, the public is going to have a say in the Super Bowl, and obviously sharp bettors as well. And Super Bowl's in Vegas. It's going to be a crazy handle. If you like, for example, Travis Kelce over yards, bet it now. if you like Travis Kelce under yards, wait. It's only, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but those popular player props, especially for this Super Bowl, they're not going down. And you can get, if you want to bet the under, wait until game time. There's only going to be more money on Kelce over, McCaffrey over. So make sure that you're thinking about the timing of your bets. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of a general Super Bowl betting tip. But yeah, for my second pick, or for my first pick, I'm going with the Niners first half money line.
Yeah, and it makes sense because, again, I think that the Spagnuolo factor is big because even like, let's say Kansas City has the worst run defense in the league. Like, I even would trust Spagnuolo in a big game to work around that, because he's had some bad defenses in the past. Like now he actually has guys that can defend the pass, which now gives you some options against the run too, so they can play man coverage even against good receivers. But I do think that the one thing, and it kind of, when you look at all their losses, it was guys injured, but I think you see over and over again, it's defensive minds that can actually match Shanahan, because like you said, he's going to come out with a great script. And the Niners, especially if they, get the ball first, they'll probably get a lead. And it's when Shanahan's script is out, now the adjustments start coming. Now Purdy's a little bit more on his own and whatnot. And so, I think the Niners' best shot here is going up early, because you don't want to have to do it a third time, right? You've gone down twice in the playoffs. We know the numbers were not favorable at all. I think Shanahan team had never come back, went down at the half by a certain amount of points or something like that. So this is not what, you don't want to get into this. You don't want to test fate a third time. So I think the emphasis is going to be on starting fast for the Niners. Like that's just going to be an emphasis. And that I think is also the best chance they have to, if they are going to win the game and cover the spread, they're probably going to have to build like a 2-score lead and then, force the Chiefs to, just remove all the margin of error. Because last year I was at that game, the Super Bowl, and I saw the Chiefs down, what was it, 24-14 at the half. They got lit up and I think the Eagles even got like a cheap score before the half too. Like I think they scored twice in the last 2 minutes, which is something the Niners will also look to do. They love to get that end of the first half score. So I do think there are some advantages to your bet there with the Niners, and that's just kind of how they look to play. Great script, score last in the first half. That's what the Niners do. And then the Chiefs, it's let's make our adjustments. Let's play great defense in the second half, and Mahomes will manage the game. If we're up, we won't do much. If we're down, we're gonna get back in it because we have the best quarterback. So it does make sense.
Yeah, and remember, not even this year with the Super Bowl, back when these two teams played, it was 20-10 49ers in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
With 7 to go, and then the Chiefs scored 3 touchdowns in the final 6 minutes. And by the way, we're remembering these games this year against, teams that have been injured, had bizarre game plans. That year, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, 3 straight postseason games. They were down double digits and won. Like that was the story of that Super Bowl team. They would get down early. Their defense would let them down, and then they would but Spagnuolo would still make adjustments. Their defense would get better in the second half. And then you had Mahomes, who can lead you to a win late. And that was the most extreme case. They had they outscored the Niners 21-0 in the final 6 minutes. But good stuff on the game breakdown, and we'll get to a little more throughout as we touch on some props. So where are you going for your second pick?
So for my second pick, the third overall of the Super Bowl 58 Sunday 6-pack, I'm going Patrick Mahomes under a half an interception, aka Mahomes not to throw a pick. And this is another one that I think if you're not really deep diving into some of the numbers and you're not paying attention to what's been happening of late and just how the strategy is shifting and the personnel is shifting, you wouldn't see much value on this because, again, Mahomes threw 14 picks this year. It's been, I think, his worst year in terms of throwing interceptions. But remember, half of the Chiefs you remove 7 interceptions just by not playing Hardman, Toney, Moore, Ross, right? But then you start just looking at, okay, well, what makes you likely to throw an interception? Well, one of those things
don't throw it in the triple coverage into the end zone.
Like right. And again, Mahomes playing some of the best ball of his life, has not had a turnover-worthy play in each of the last 4 games, the longest stretch of his career that spans 147 dropbacks, 132 pass attempts. He hasn't thrown a pick in his last 6 postseason games. He's been really, careful about that. He's been vocal about kind of talking about the lessons he's learned from, his struggles in, some of the earlier postseasons. That he did throw 2 picks in that first Super Bowl he was ever in against the 49ers. And, that kind of, that didn't help, obviously. But he also talks a lot about that Bucs game where, they just weren't really prepared to deal with the pressure and whatnot. So that's why I think, it is significant that the Niners run defense has been weak, because I do think this current Mahomes is more willing to check into run plays, is more willing to take check downs, because he knows he has a defense behind him. But also, Patrick Mahomes average up to target ticked under 7 this year. That's the lowest of his career. The deeper you're throwing, the more you're going to throw picks. And just now the way this offense is set up, you have Kelce over 80% catch rate. He's going to get a ton of targets. Most likely going to be the first read on almost every pass. Rashee Rice, second read almost every pass. He's also over 80% catch rate. Also a guy that you're targeting usually within, 5 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Then the guys that can beat man coverage on the outside, it's not like you're throwing into to double coverage, or you're throwing, to Watson or MVS when there's a safety over the top. Mahomes now, he's seeing the field so well, he's only throwing to those guys if it's one-on-one. You don't usually get a lot of picks when you're just in man one-on-one. So not as worried about those guys. Obviously you could get a tip ball, you could get a drop, but just the way Mahomes is playing, the way they're targeting these guys, it just doesn't lend itself to him throwing a pick. And just looking at the numbers, for his career, he's thrown a pick in exactly half of his regular season games. In the playoffs, he's only thrown a pick in 4 of 17, just 24%. And remember, competition, especially, defensively, goes up in the postseason. So he's playing against better defenses, throwing fewer picks. And now you essentially, like you said, trim the fat. You're facing a team that you might even run a little more than usual. Last Super Bowl, Chiefs put up 38 points. And I think Mahomes is, 21 of 27 for a $182. Like, it just, the volume doesn't always have to be there for Mahomes. So I think you have a good shot at him. He said he's been making a point to just be really careful, because he knows he has this defense now. So I just think all those different factors kind of add up to Mahomes playing another clean game. So give me Mahomes under half an interception.
All right, good stuff there. I like it, and hopefully, like I said, it just doesn't throw in the triple coverage to ruin the bet like last week. But for my second pick and the 4th overall of the Super Bowl Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with Elijah Mitchell under 1.5 rush attempts. So this is pretty straightforward. You might look and say, oh, he had 4 carries last week, 4 carries for 7 yards. Well, yeah, they came at the very end when McCaffrey went out with a neck injury. Before then, McCaffrey had taken 100% of the running back snaps. I expect that to continue. Again, maybe they give him 1 if like McCaffrey is completely gassed. I don't know. I don't see it. Like, I think that you get, maybe Juszczyk gets 1 for like short yardage. You want to power him up there. And then I think you're gonna have Deebo Samuel is gonna get some carries as well. He's gonna get a percentage of the rush workload. I think that this is now, it's the last game of the season. And yet they were already doing this before McCaffrey went out with injury. McCaffrey's your workhorse. He's who got you here. You're going to get all the running back carries. So I think that this number should be shouldn't be 1.5. I don't think he gets a carry. So hopefully he gets a snap, which is the only caveat here. But I expect McCaffrey to get every running back snap. You're the projector of this in the player prop. Do you agree here?
Yeah, that's so we have a props tool at Action Labs, and I think for both me and our guy Sean Kernan, the odds maker, that's coming up as the biggest edge among Super Bowl props. And it's not every prop market like that's in the tool. It's the main rushing, receiving, attempts, yards, and all that stuff. But for the most part, especially as we record this, the week before the Super Bowl, most of the player props that are out now, the usual normal just median projection props or whatever, they're pretty sharp by the market. This one I do think has value because, again, as you broke down, they're not going to give Mitchell snaps unless McCaffrey gets hurt. Now there is about a
that's what you're betting on.
You're betting on
McCaffrey leaving the game with an injury or getting hurt at any point.
Yeah, and that's usually, and I do factor that into my projections, and I still have Mitchell projected for about a 1 carry flat, and that's that's just literally factoring in things like what happened last week, where McCaffrey goes down. Literally, if he just makes it one more play, or even probably if he doesn't have that good of a run, because I think he ran like 50 yards and sets him up like 1st and goal. So at that point they're all right, we got to punch it in here. But yeah, that's not
and that's every prop. That's every player prop. There's always injury risk if you're whatever you're betting.
And that's why generally unders are more valuable. So if there was any, obviously just blindsided by Baltimore's game plan last week, as I'm sure a lot of people were, but if there's any error in, my ways in that sense, it was just, well, I did take an over on Gus Edwards. It's not usually a type of pick I make on player props just because of, you're just usually getting a little bit of that built-in edge for injuries. But yeah, I agree. I think the biggest challenge here is just him to get a snap. So hopefully for you, San Francisco does find a way to either win the game, because then he would probably be in on the kneel downs. Although if it's the Super Bowl game-ending kneel down, they probably still have McCaffrey
out there.
Or
maybe he gets like one of the kneel downs.
First half kneel down though. You could have, because if let's say, but that's also kind of iffy just because we know San Francisco usually likes to score to end the half, so they're probably going to be unlikely to get the ball last and just kneel on it. But there's a lot of ways that this could still hit, and worst things that could happen is you just get no action. But I do think there is an edge on this, and I'll also say, some kind of an interesting caveat, and factor in this game is Deebo Samuel and how he's used, because in 8 of 11 postseason games for Deebo, he's been under 50 receiving yards, but he's had 35 plus rushing yards in those games. Now, twice he's had, I think, just a couple of carries to get there, but other 2 times he had 10 carries. So there's also a chance that even if McCaffrey gets gassed or hurt, most important game of the year, Deebo Samuel might very well be the backup running back, because I know that they like Juwan Jennings as a run blocker. And now they're starting to like Chris Conley. Like, they're not going to play Chris Conley unless they have to, but they are, kind of pleased with some of the things he's been able to contribute, both as a run blocker and running some routes downfield. You saw that against the Packers. So you even have some outs here, even if McCaffrey does, have to leave for a couple plays or something like that. So I like it, and I do show value on that. And by the way, we'll have a full Propapalooza episode, as we do every year, right here on this channel. Me, Kerner will be on that as well. That'll come out later this week, so look out for that. But I do like the Mitchell under a lot.
Yeah, and make sure to check out. We won't go too deep into special teams. I will have a special teams piece out there, but Kerner and you had an early prop episode. Heavy special teams focus, so make sure you guys check that out as well. Before we get to your final pick, any quick thoughts on the total? I'm right around 48. it's a fast track. I think it's just going to depend on the way that I see the game playing out. San Fran fast start, Kansas City adjusts, and then again they're going to have a successful second half. Kansas City maybe slower start. It depends on how much they're down. So the total's tough for me to see how this game plays out. If I had to bet the total, I'd probably go over. But I don't show that much of an edge. Do you have any thoughts on the total for anyone looking to bet it?
Yeah, I would lean over as well, but I agree. It's not a major edge because the
game's going to be slow. The game's going to be
yes.
49ers are slow, and I think that they're going to run a lot. So the clock is going to go, and I expect the Chiefs to also run a bunch. The game's going to go pretty quick for as quick as the Super Bowl can go.
Yeah, and remember, we talking about Mahomes, and he's last week against the best pass defense in the league, he completed 30 of 39 passes, 77%. Second straight week, he was 70% or higher in completions, and so that a lot of times that's not going to stop the clock either. And you're throwing short, things like that, and that'll kind
everything was within 5 yards.
Yeah, so then that'll go into my next pick, but yeah, I think I would lean over also because, again, I think the market is still a little bit undervaluing the Chiefs' offense, and some of the changes that it's made, and you just have two good offenses on a fast track, and I think when you look at if you were just, let's say, simulating not just this game but the entire season over 10,000 times, I think this total, how it's ended up at 47 and a half, that's squeezing it to the low end. It's
an outlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's closer. Yeah. It's closer to the tail. So you're not getting much lower than that when you're talking about two of the best offenses in football. And I know the defenses are great as well, but offense still is going to win. Two of the greatest defenses, two of the greatest offenses, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, another, two great offensive minds at calling the plays. And remember, the Chiefs, they've been elite second half defensively, and that's it's one of the reasons you like the first half spread. But I think it's something they've scored on now 9 straight opening drives in the postseason. So you could still get enough points up on the board early on to get it there. And then if Mahomes is down, you trust him to put points on the board, even if Kansas City's defense isn't allowing points. So I would lean over as well. But I do agree there are some things, running wise and just that game flow wise that could lead to an under. But if I had to do it, I would go over.
Yeah, but the other thing that you mentioned about the Chiefs, if you look at the Chiefs' offensive numbers, first quarter, the Niners have been much better, but the Chiefs have been good on first tries in the playoffs. The Chiefs' offensive numbers in the second half are not good, especially compared to the 49ers. You have to remember they've made some recent changes, and a lot of times they just will they will do nothing, right? So if they're up, they just are letting their defense win. Like last week, right? They just went into a shell. And they didn't have to do much. It's a whole different story if it's on a fast track, this new offense, and if they're playing from behind. So a lot of those Chiefs those offensive numbers in the second half are pretty meaningless to me. So just for what it's worth. But where are you going for your third and final pick?
For my third and final pick, 5th overall of the Super Bowl 58 6-pack, I am going with the Kansas City Chiefs over 19 and a half first downs. And I mentioned, a lot of things we've talked about up until this point kind of lead me to this play, which is number one, you have Mahomes throwing shorter, not as many explosives. So that's just naturally going to lead to longer drives, more first downs, rather than, picking it up in chunks. Now, especially now, you have hyper efficient underneath receiving options. You also are facing a run defense that can be vulnerable. So a lot of things kind of playing into that. And if you just look at the numbers overall this season, which again, there are a lot of they're not going to hold up because I think the Chiefs offense is better now. There's just a lot of noise, but Kansas City, even if you just take the numbers for what they are, hit 20 first downs in 12 of the 19 Mahomes starts, 63%. And San Francisco, as good as its defense was, excluding week 18 when guys were resting, San Francisco allowed 20 or more first downs 56% of the time, including both postseason games. So I think this is a very attainable number for the Chiefs. Just this is how Mahomes is playing. He's more deliberately willing to take checkdowns. He can also get, an underrated factor is Mahomes, excellent scrambler and just does it a lot more in the playoffs. So could also get some of those, oh my God, he should not convert this first down. They should have punted type of rushing first downs from Mahomes that you don't necessarily get as much of in the regular season. So I like the Chiefs over 19.5 first downs.
Like it. For my third pick in the 6th overall of the Super Bowl Sunday 6-pack, we got to get a fun one in here. So I'm going to give a fun one for my final pick of the season. And then I'll give a real one also that I'm betting. But we're going to go over 47.5 yards for the longest field goal. This, at the very minimum, if all your bets are on fire, and from the anthem to the coin toss to the whatever you're betting early, at this one, at least you will be alive until the very end, depending on how the game goes. You could always hit this in the final minute. But other than that, I think it's great. It's a great kicking stadium. You have altitude, fast track, no conditions. You have two kickers with huge legs, two coaches who kind of get a little bit too conservative at times in that range. And Butker could hit from like 62 in these conditions. And Moody has a huge leg. So a fun one that I do like and did bet over 47.5. And then the real one, if you're looking for one with more analysis, that won't be included. But I did bet under sacks for Purdy and under 2.5 sacks, which for what it's worth is hit 14 of 18 times for the Niners. Now you could say, well, the Chiefs had 57 sacks. They were 1-2 with the Ravens in number of sacks. But just how I see this game playing out, I think the Niners are going to use a ton of play action, run a lot. And I don't think the Chiefs are going to blitz as much. So I think that the way that Spagnuolo is going to play this, because Purdy's been so good against the blitz, I think that they're going to play more of the run and then a more coverage, which is something that they haven't done. So that kind of inflates their blitz numbers. And then, Amenahu is out as well. So, and Purdy's, I think, trusting his legs more to run now, which he hasn't done at times this year. So if he sees pressure, it seems like he's just more willing to get out and run and scramble. So yeah, we're going to go, I did bet under 2.5 sacks, but for the official last pick of the season for the 6-pack, we'll go over 47.5 yards. So it'll be one of those fun sweats where someone's lining up for like a 52-yarder and you're like, oh man, this is going to decide my bet if Moody hits the post or not. So yeah, final pick of the year, over 47.5. Longest field goal.
Yeah, like you said, you could literally. Yeah, so we talked about the field goal offline, and I do like it because I do think Andy Reid is going to be. That's just what they do, as good as Mahomes in that offense is. He's usually going to take the points. So I think if you get into that,
Shanahan does that too.
Shanahan does it too. I think he's a little bit more likely to maybe eschew it just because he's always said, we are usually the better team. So we don't have to take a lot of risks. We don't have to fake punt and do all that stuff. Maybe he looks at things differently against Mahomes, especially depending on how the game flow goes. But also, Moody has missed 5 times under 50. So maybe that plays into it. But if there's ever a lot of those kicks, I remember one came in the weather. A couple of them came in the weather. So now, like you said, altitude, indoors, Moody even could get his stuff together. And then as far as the sacks, I think I have Kansas City at like 2.3. So yeah, I am a little under this, especially when you factor in, median is usually lower than the projection for that kind of thing, because it's obviously can't be 2.3, it can only be 2 or 3. Lean that way as well. It's just tough to know exactly what Purdy's going to do. We just haven't seen him on the stage before, but I do agree. He did look like he was a little more willing to take off, especially in that game in the second half against Detroit. So I have the Chiefs +2, Mahomes under a half an interception, and the Chiefs over 19.5 first downs. And Stuck, you have the Niners first half money line -125 at BetMGM. The Elijah Mitchell under 1.5 carries, and longest field goal for either team over 47.5. And so that's our Super Bowl 58 6-pack.